Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a video that I'm very excited to film and bring to you. We're going to talk to my Uncle Paul here, and we're going to look at his arrowhead collection. He has been collecting arrowheads for a really long time, and we get so many questions, so many messages, so many comments. Hey, do you find arrowheads where you live? If so, what do they look like? And just people wanting to generally know what's this buzz about the arrowheads. So I have found a few, not many, but a few in my lifetime. Dad's found a few, but this man is the one that's found the most, and then actually kept up with where he found them as far as labeling and having a kind of a full, complete history. I'm really bad to pick some up and be like, cool, and then I never know where it come from, and I think that's part of the neat thing about it, the history. Where can you say you found the piece? So then you can kind of go through your mind, wow, I wonder if that means that whoever used this arrowhead was here, were they living here, were they passing through, did they shoot it at an animal and just lose it? I think definitely where you find the arrowhead is part of the history. So
yeah, I do know some folks, like some of my cousins and folks like that have found way better arrowheads than I've ever found, and they just kind of tossed them in a drawer and then eventually lost them, or they got broken, or whatever.
Especially arrowheads that have little thin fragile points.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually telling me a story about that earlier, about one of the family members who had one and dropped it.
That was perfect. Yeah, I'll show you that one when we do the little close-ups and things.
Cool.
I'll just go ahead and say I don't have any arrowheads that are not broken. So all my arrowheads are missing some portion of them, and I'm not a big collector. I hunted arrowheads from the time I was about 14 to the time I was about 18. I haven't hunted arrowheads since, but it used to be one of my favorite things to do, like on a Saturday, just to go around. And one reason I don't do it, I guess, like I did then, is there used to be places right here where we live, because we had more gardens and more fields that were plowed. Now there's pretty much your mom and dad doing the only gardening, and they're not really gardening the places that seem to have the most arrowheads. I think the big garden, or as Tipper calls it, Pap's old garden, I think the creek probably once upon a time ran through that, because if you look, most of the rocks that are in that's kind of what it looks like.
Smooth, yeah.
So I've found a grand total of 2 arrowheads in that garden ever, even though I looked hundreds of times. You and Corey, I think, have both found arrowheads there.
I found one. I probably shared that somewhere in a video. I did find one, and then I found arrowheads in the creek, which is weird.
Right, and y'all were doing that when you were little, and I'll be honest with you, when you first told me that, I didn't believe it. I thought, there's not going to be, you can't find arrowheads in the creek. And I even thought that even if there was an arrowhead in the creek, it would get kind of worn smooth over time. But y'all did that back then. Corey found one even more recently. I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, she found a nice one in a creek. Kathy Casey, who was a teacher at Martins Creek, where I was the principal, her son, James, same thing. He liked to get in the creek. He found several arrowheads in the creek. Mrs. Casey, I believe, found arrowheads in the creek. So I've never found an arrowhead in the creek, but I finally just kind of had to accept that, yes, you can find arrowheads in a creek.
I think that was probably right place, right time kind of thing. It was probably buried. Maybe it had rained. Natural tumbling action of the rocks just kind of revealed. I would say that's probably all about the right time, right place. However, I did find one in a lake, in a TVA lake, and it's the same kind of thing. Winter, water had recessed. It was in the water. It's only in about that much water, but same sort of deal. It would have been the exact same like topography as this. It's just underwater. So, and that of course leads you down another rabbit trail. I just wonder what would be under there. Sure, lots of arrowheads would be buried for the same reason they're here. But
well, and that lake wasn't there when the Native Americans were here.
Oh no, that's only been there. It's been less than 100 years. Yeah,
so,
being a TVA
so
lake.
I'm sure you could find plenty, in the lake bed when the water went down like that. I said I'd only found 2 in Pap's garden. One of the 2 I know for certain was washed into the garden from out of the woods, because you could just see all the debris and everything. It had really come kind of a torrential rain, and it had kind of come down this little ravine through the woods, and it had just washed out into the edge of the garden. So I found it in the garden, but it really had come from somewhere else.
That's also something really interesting to keep in mind when you're thinking about looking for arrowheads and hunting arrowheads is they may, I said a lot of it is the history of where did they come from, but sometimes you can't generalize an exact location. It may just be more of an area, because something like that could have happened And then as far as material, I have very limited geological knowledge, and there's lots of people out there who will know the answer to this. In fact, and if you do, comment below, and maybe you can say, yeah, this is so, or kind of lead me in the direction of what I'm going to say here. But I think that sometimes when I look at material of rocks, like Arrowhead say, something that was used as a tool, if I see something that's like what looks to me like flint or a type of rock that I know to not be here, that leads me to believe that come from somewhere else, that might have been traded from another group, another tribe, something that was traded in here. The one perfect arrowhead that I ever found, the best one I ever found down here in this garden, is like a flint material. And that's just not here. I've spent all my time outside in the creek looking for rocks. It's kind of my thing, and this place doesn't have flint. So then I'm led to believe, well, why is it here? And was that raw material, the nappable material, if you will, traded in rough from somewhere else, or did they just, because I do think
and
trade them, because I'm sure different groups of people would have had to cross each other and then be able to trade and look at stuff and make relationships and be friends and all that kind of thing. So that's also extremely fascinating. And if it's not a local material where you find said arrowhead, if it's not the material that's found there, then where did it come from? And that's amazing. How many hands did it pass through? How many miles did it travel? So all of this history that comes with it, that I think knowing the general area of where it come from helps you have a starting place for that.
Back when I did used to do that hunting, I would always go after a rain. I wouldn't just go. I would, it depended on whether or not it rained. If it rained that night or the day before, then I would go arrowhead hunting that Saturday.
Right.
Because that kind of cleans everything off. I mean, without the rain, it could be lying right there, but you're not going to see it. And then the rain just kind of cleans it off for you. And I mentioned that a lot of these are broken. A lot of them were broken by the plow or the tiller. Pap always used the tiller. And it's always kind of heartbreaking if you find one that would have been so well made and then part of it's gone. Even worse than that, I have at times looked for him while he was tilling, and you find one and you can tell it's just been broken because the edge, the inside of it's just perfectly clean. So you know that tiller, one of those tiller tines just happened
Just
to
hit it.
hit it and break it. And then of course a lot of them were broken, I'm sure, when they were shot. If they went into an animal, most likely they hit a bone, which is going to at least chip it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, of course, they miss and they would have missed and hit a tree or a rock or what have you. And then a lot of the ones that you'll see in one particular box, there's some places that you can find plenty, but it is a place where they were being made. And so it's almost like every other rock you look at has been worked. You can tell. So it's like everything is a chip. Everything.
They were just sitting there
But
working.
a lot of times you're going to find some arrowheads there, but you're not going to find really good arrowheads. You're going to find arrowheads that weren't finished, or that they weren't satisfied with, and they just kind of discarded them.
Right.
And then the one place that I'll mention when we start looking at the arrowheads, right not far from us, just probably about 500 yards from us, 500 or 600 yards from us, it was a great place to look. There weren't tons, like some places you could go and it's like, wow, there must have been a village here.
Wow.
So there weren't tons, but you would usually find something after a rain, and it must not have been a place where they were making them. It must have been a place where they were frequently shooting them at something, because most of the arrowheads you would find there were complete, or they had been finished. In other words, it wasn't like let me start that, I kind of got out, I'm a little crooked, let me start over. It wasn't that kind of stuff. It was something that looked like was probably perfect when it was shot.
Cool. Without further ado, I'm going to switch the camera around, grab the arrowhead, show you some up close, and you can talk to us about different little things about what you found. So.
Sure. So Katie, if you look at these two boxes here, pretty much everything in these boxes, or for the most part rather, the things in these two boxes came from a place where I was talking about where they were being made. So some of them, you can tell they weren't. I'm trying to find a good example. Like this one right here, I mean, it's not really, to me, it doesn't look like it's finished. Same thing with this one or this one. It doesn't look like it was ever finished. Now, some of them have clear definition. Now, if you see a BR underneath one, that means Brasstown. If you see just a B, that means Bellevue. So my best friend, his daddy, cleared off some land to make more pasture land, and there was a huge boulder at the top of a hill, and there were chips all around that boulder. And I hunted arrowheads there. My friend's daddy did. Maybe some of his cousins or siblings. We were all just kind of looking there. I do remember I found this little red one there, which would have been really sweet if it weren't broken. Most of it's gone. Like whatever that would be, 25% of it's gone. But that would have been a really nice one. But a lot of these, like I say, not really finished. Like it's just was the beginnings of one, and then just kind of chunked. At least that's what I think. Now it could be that they were weathered to get kind of more rounded and less defined, but to me I figured they probably weren't finished. And some of these are just points. That's most of the arrowhead is missing there. I like that little rose-colored rock, and there are different styles, and I don't know how much faith you can put in it, but you can get books and things like that that will tell you by the style of the arrowhead. It will give you kind of a date range, but I don't know how they would really know that. I like the little bell shape that comes down on this one. It's a shame that most of it's gone. That one, I guess, would have been a spearhead. If you just kind of follow those lines up, I'm going to say it would probably come to about right there.
Yeah, I think so.
You had mentioned certain stone not being here. This tip right here, which I have a question mark on. The reason I have a question mark on is my brother, he bought a Volkswagen one time, and that tip was in the glove compartment.
Isn't that crazy?
But that, I believe, is chert. Now, you're the rock expert. Is that chert? I don't think it's obsidian.
It's not obsidian, no. It's more like a chert or flint-like material. But whatever it is, it's not here. So you're right, it would be.
And so that seems to come in different colors. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of blue. Obviously, that's black. I've seen orange. I've seen gray.
Flint.
I meant to bring, I have a hunk of chert about that big that Pap found in the road that I meant to bring up here, which would kind of support your question or your idea about did they trade it up in hunks? Because it's a hunk, a little smaller than a baseball. Maybe I can bring it and you can later photograph
That'd
it,
be cool.
stick it in there. That one probably never finished, but also I think would have been pretty large.
I think
and
so.
you can see the edge, that would really slice through
Oh, that's sharp.
an animal if you had that on a good stout stick and you jobbed an animal with it.
One thing I like about this one that you can see if you kind of look down it this way, even without this focus too much, there we go. It's been beveled.
Mhm.
So it's been,
Yeah.
definitely kind of beveled. And that's something interesting too when you start thinking about arrowheads. You're only thinking about something pointy and sharp to actually penetrate the body of whatever animal they were going to want to kill and eat. But you don't think about this actual work of thinning out the size toward the edge so that you have actually something that would actually penetrate an animal, and then some sort of aerodynamic with that. So I think that's really interesting. These two are interesting because they're similar.
They're both in Brasstown.
Isn't that cool? So it almost makes you wonder, did the same...
Could have been the same. Same Native American maybe made it.
I like this one because this is the only one in here that's different. And so, of course, I know where the Coleman Gap is. So you just found that. You were there one time. And
Just walking in the old road bed or whatever.
That's cool.
That one's, it's, so much of it's gone, but it's so obvious
Oh, yeah, look at that little
that it's an
notch.
arrowhead, because those, what do you call those? We should have asked Matt before we started, but that's to keep it from coming out of the animal once it's in. The barbs, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
So it won't come back out. It holds it in there.
Right. This one right here is really interesting to me because I can see that if you were to take this and hold it up, it's transparent. Yeah, it'd be really easy to see through. And there is quartz like that here that is very jimmy, is what I would call it, and translucent. But a lot of quartz that I've seen in the state of Georgia is like that. Very jimmy, very translucent. So with that type of material, obviously that's definitely found here, but it's found other places. So then it makes you wonder, did it come from here? Did it come from somewhere else? Because something like this material or this is obviously like, no, that's not from here. So this one too, this shape here that we talked about, this shape is very similar to the one that I found in the lake. Yeah. And size-wise.
To me, it's less elaborate. Like, it gets the job done, but it's not as elaborate as like this. You know, that's more of an obvious arrow shape.
It's really funny that this one makes me think of, and I'll have to put the link in the description down below. If you like arrowheads, you like bow hunting, anything like that, there's this man named Troy Fowler. If you ever see this video, hello, Ranch Fairy. The Ranch Fairy. So he does aerodynamics, bare shaft tuning, all about the mechanics of how to be a successful bow hunter. And so he talks about Magnus as a company. Magnus sells broadheads, and they do what they call the single bevel, and this is still different, but this is kind of reminiscent of this single bevel design that Magnus does. And so it just kind of makes you wonder, at this time, all of these years ago, where this was what they had. They didn't have access to forging and metallurgy and doing this kind of stuff. It's fascinating what you can learn with their shapes and what they did out of rock compared to what we can do now, because we can machine things. So it makes you wonder, if you could go back and study this, could you come up with more successful broadhead design that's more reminiscent of something that worked out of stone like thousands of years earlier? I just think that's super interesting.
This arrowhead is kind of what inspired me to hunt arrowheads. I didn't find it when they were grading for Pap and Granny's house. Uncle Ray was running the bulldozer, and he pulled up a stump, and this was in the roots of the stump.
Wow.
And I don't know if he saw it, picked it up, or if Pap saw it and picked it up, but this stayed in my mom's jewelry box for my whole childhood. And I would just go back there every now and then and take it out and look at it and feel of it. She had this back there, and she had a little pen knife, and I would go back and look at those two things.
That's so sweet.
But when I was a kid, I would think, that arrowhead's crooked, you know? Because I would think that here's the point of it. Yeah. And I didn't really understand what you were talking about just a second ago with the beveling. So this didn't just break the tip off, but there's a hunk right there that's missing. So this arrowhead really wouldn't have been crooked. You know, the point would have really been more over here.
I can see that.
But when it broke, that part broke. So that might show what you're talking about, how it's kind of like that.
It most definitely
It's almost like an airfoil shape, like the wing of an airplane, but I think on an airfoil shape, it's uneven, whereas this is more even.
Wow.
But that would have been it is an arrowhead, you know, it's not a spearhead, but if you could pick that up, it's pretty heavy and it's pretty big. So that tells you that they had pretty strong bows.
Oh, they would have had to.
You know, it's going to take a lot more to shoot that hard as opposed to one of these little what I've always been told were bird for killing birds.
And that's a really interesting point to mention too. Different sizes, different shapes for different game. I've always been told the same thing too. Little ones for smaller game. This shape here too that's also something that I've seen a lot of. And so this is like this shape up here, but it's just a little more dramatic. And then this beveling, like, man, this edge is sharp. And you can really see where they left more material up here and just started off the sides. It just seems like I've seen, as far as looking at other arrowheads that people have found, it seems like I've seen a lot that have been found here like that.
That one's from Bellevue, and from your geology standpoint and your rock standpoint, it's interesting to notice that a lot of these from Bellevue, they have this iron.
Yeah, like
see
this
the little
staining.
flecks of iron in there?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that made them, well, that one's Brasstown, that one's Bellevue. I don't know if that made them more likely to break. You would know more about that
I'm
than
not
me,
really sure.
But you can see those little lines. At least that's what I thought they are. Because I've cleaned these. You know, I would clean them with a toothbrush and soap and water. So that's not dirt, those little specks. That's actually in the rock.
Some sort of inclusion, inside the material. I'm not sure. That's cool, though.
Want to grab some more?
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny. So this is actually 2 pieces that we took out of a glass case just so it would be easier to see them up close without the glass.
These are not labeled, but a lot of them I do remember where I found them. There's a few of them I didn't find. Pap found both of these, and he found both of them in Uncle Henry's garden. And that's what I've always called chert. It may be something different, but anything that has that scalloped look, almost like carved plastic, that's what I consider to be chert. But that one's gray and that one's black.
Yeah, and it's like a matte, a flat color. It's not like...
Not shiny like obsidian.
Yeah, and then so this one is just probably one of the most interesting ones to me. That white line through there is just some funky inclusion in that material. And so looking at that, if you could see it in person, it's very, very, very black. So that looks gray, but it's super black. And so all of these that we're talking about that have kind of like this scalloped, that's just... This material has like, because it's silica rich, the fracture in it's conchoidal, what they call conchoidal, so it looks chip-like. Conchoidal, you almost think like clamshell. But you're right, as far as like this material looks drastically different than this quartz does, because even though this does have a conchoidal fracture, and quartz does too, this just looks totally, it's a night and day's difference. And this one right here is really interesting. It's got more of a look like those two that you said Pat found. Do you know where it was from? Yeah,
that's my favorite arrowhead right there.
That's your
just
favorite.
because it's just unusual, and I found it. So Uncle Ray, he had a garden in front of his house for many years, and that's the place that I was talking about. That to me was the best place ever to hunt arrowheads, because you didn't find chips, things like that, where they were working on them. You only found really arrowheads. Now, for a long time. The whole garden was plowed, and I'd say it was about an acre. That garden was about an acre. This is the first arrowhead I ever found, and I found it in that garden. And my cousin Alan had found one, and he was showing it to me, and I was all excited about it. And he said, "Well, why don't you go see if you can find one?" So I went down there, and this was sticking. About that much of it was sticking out of a dirt clod. I could see this part just kind of sticking out of a dirt clod, and it was in the kind of the far right-hand corner if you started from the end closest to your house. Now this one, they stopped having a garden there, and then Alan and his buddy Kent, to the best I remember, they got a wild hair and decided they were going to plant a garden there, and they were going to sell green beans or something. I don't know.
Wow,
and they had this plow thing that was like an old iron wheel, like a wagon wheel thing on it, and two sort of handlebars, and then a plow at the front of it. And they hooked it to a truck, and one had it, and the other one pulled the truck. Well, they made about 1.5 rows and quit. and that 1.5 rows of that garden, the rest was grass, stayed exposed for a few years. It just took a few years for the grass to go back over it. And so what I would do is I would walk to get the mail, and every time I'd walk to get the mail, I would walk that one rut, or that one row. That's all I had. So it's a place about this wide and about an acre long, and that's where I found that one that you were asking me about. I found it on the end closest to the mailbox, and I was so excited.
Oh yeah, wow.
When I found it. This one I found in Granny's yard.
Oh, how cool.
I think I found that one in Pap's garden, and I think I found that one in Pap's garden, and that's the only two I've found in his garden.
Which is where, for our viewers, where Mom and Dad are growing corn right now.
Yep, that's right. We're going back to that bell shape that we talked about that a couple had in that other box. There's another one, and that also came from that same site in Bellevue.
Wow.
That's sort of the same shape. It's hard to know.
Is.
Some of it's missing there. That one's from Bellevue. There's that iron again,
and that's
what I'm calling iron anyway.
That same shape. So we're definitely seeing themes here.
Here's that bell shape. Now that one would have been, if it were there, I'd say that would have been a really sharp arrowhead.
Yeah, I would think so.
The other side of this, these are kind of held down with tape and glue, but the other side of this is mostly blue, that color.
Wow.
And I debated which way to show it.
Right.
But I finally went with the two-tone, but the other side of this is mostly blue.
The contrast is cool. This one is another one kind of transparent. I do think that's cool. And that's kind of almost what I would call a frosted look. It's just the material looks frosty. Definitely would be transparent if you held it up. Even this one right here would be transparent if you held it up. And I really...
Partly it would.
I like that. That's Jimmy.
Some of these, I believe, were actually serrated.
Oh my gosh, yeah, look
Just
at that.
like a serrated kitchen knife.
Wow.
And I think part of it is gone, but I think that was intentional.
Oh,
and that
yeah.
way it's going to cut more as it goes in, and the animal's going to bleed, going to lose more blood, going to die quicker. This one I found in center field at the ball field at the old Martins Creek School. And we were down there, they were doing work on the field, and 7th and 8th graders, I was in 8th grade, we were down there throwing rocks off of the field, and I found that one in center field. And Randy Barnett, the principal, very smart man, he did have, I think, a background in geology, and he refused to believe me initially that I found it there. And the reason he wouldn't believe me is because they had done a big deep cut where they'd taken out part of the bank, and he was just saying there's no way that Arrowhead would be this deep under the ground. And I had lied to him plenty of times to get out of trouble, but I've never told a lie about an arrowhead.
No.
And he eventually believed me, and the conclusion that he came to was they also trucked in some sand for that ball field, and he believed they had probably scooped it up somewhere along a river or something like that. Where they
no, that's interesting.
But to me, that's again what I would call church. There's another one.
Yeah, that different material that is, and what I would say is not from here. So then, where did it come from? Something else I wanted to address here. I know people are going to ask about these crystals, these crystal points. There's
Obviously,
two of
those
them.
are not man-made. They're not arrowheads, and I didn't find those. Either you, Corey, or your dad found those down at his hunting camp in Georgia.
Yeah. Okay. So I
I've
kind
never
of
found
wondered.
any formations like that.
I kind of wondered. So that's what I mentioned earlier, as far as finding clear quartz in Georgia. Dad has hunted many different leases over the last 30 years plus in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, and he would come home with just handfuls, no joke, like wads of these things.
Yeah,
and-
y'all have given me several, bigger and better than these.
Oh, yeah.
I just went ahead and stuck these in here just for decoration.
This one's really cool. I don't know if you can see, it actually has a teeny tiny little crystal there and there, so it has a really cool formation. But he did find bunches of these crystal points, and I even found a few myself when we would visit. Nothing big or exciting. But
He gave me some probably as big as my thumb.
yeah, he's. I'll have to ask him at some point. He said there was like one place on one particular lease where they were just everywhere.
Those make me think of Superman's Fortress of Solitude.
Yes, I'm getting that feeling.
While you're talking about those things, obviously these are not arrowheads either, and I don't know what they are. It's something that Pap found, and he gave to me. I think he might have found them on the side of a bank near a oil tank when he was filling up somebody's fuel tank, for their stove, for their
Like-
heating oil.
Super smooth. I mean, it definitely
Very
looks
smooth, yeah.
like something man would have done.
I don't
you know
know
what
if
I
they're
mean?
game pieces or what they are.
That's a good idea. Could be.
Moving over to this one, I put kind of some of the weirdo stuff on here. That one probably, it could even be a drill. I have seen sometimes things that people say are drill bits, and if you just look how skinny it was, and so both of those maybe they're not arrowheads, maybe they were actually for drilling. I don't know. To me, that's one of the smallest real arrowheads I've ever seen. It's also out of church. And
Very dainty too.
To me, it looks
Wow.
like a housefly.
Yeah, I mean it's like the size of my thumb.
And if you can
My
pick it
thumb
up and
covers
look at it, it's not the tip of an arrowhead. It's not like this part is broken and gone. That is the extent of it. I mean, there'd be a little bit missing from the tip, but that's 99% of that
They were
arrowhead.
using that to hunt mice.
This would be my second favorite arrowhead, and I found it in Pinhook, probably about a mile from here. Similar thing, Whitmarsh farm there, the Ridgefield farm, they bought some land on the Pinhook, kind of near the Pinhook Road, and they cleared it off, and somebody told me about it, so I went there and I started hunting. I found several there. This and this scraper are the only ones that I remember for sure finding. And that's one reason I like this so much, is I found this, and then about 50 to 60 feet away I found this scraper, and they're out of the same rock. Now, I could be wrong, but I know somebody's going to say, well, what's a scraper? So according to what I've read, this would be either held in your hand like this, or maybe attached to a stick, and this part right here, which is kind of sharp and thin, would be used to scrape the underside of a hide or something like that.
Tan with, yeah.
To kind of remove the gunk and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's called a scraper. Somebody else might look at it and say, no, that's just where they were starting an arrowhead and they didn't get finished. But I do believe when you see that seashell shape,
it's like scalloped, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a scraper. Funny story about this one. Somebody told me there must have been a curse on that arrowhead, because I hunted and I kept hunting, and it was getting darker. I didn't have a flashlight, and I should have left, but I thought, I'm going to keep hunting, and I was glad I did, because I found this arrowhead. But then walking out of there in the dark, I couldn't see what I was doing. I was walking up a really steep ground and coming up to the edge of a roadbed like that, and because the ground was so steep, I was hunkered way over. Oh. And there was a root that was laying, like half of it was laying in the roadbed and half of it was just sort of sticking out in the air like that, And I stepped on that end that was sticking out, and because it was dark, I never saw anything coming, and so I never even actually blinked my eye. And the other end of the root just wham, just slapped me right in the eye, and it was also very dirty.
Hey.
And by the time I got to my first cousin's house, and I went inside to show them that arrowhead, they were like, oh my gosh, what happened to your eye? And I went and looked in the mirror, and it was, of course, real blood red and swollen. But, it was fine. It didn't hurt my vision, but it did scare me a little bit there.
You were like, it's worth it for the arrowhead.
The last ones are in this little box here. Never bothered to mount them. There's another super tiny arrowhead. It's pretty well made. It even has some barbs.
That's precious.
To me, that would also be considered shirt. You can really see that beveling that you were talking about, if you can look at it.
Oh, yeah, man. Wow, that's just precious.
I don't, unfortunately, remember where I found that, but I did find it. There's one that, is broken. That's probably the last arrowhead I ever found, and you can see I didn't even clean the dirt off of it. I just chunked it in there. And I wasn't even hunting arrowheads. I just noticed it somewhere on the ground and picked it up. That one right there, another place you could hunt arrowheads, but I think it'd be unlikely unless it's just a place where, there's just a lot of activity. But up the creek, you and Corey love going up the creek.
Oh, yeah.
On the right, before you get to what we call the pear trees, there's a huge gully that comes down, and it had rained really hard, and I just got this wild hair, like, I'll go up there and start at the bottom of that gully and go all the way to the top. And I found this arrowhead in that gully.
Oh, that's awesome.
And same thing, it looks kind of crooked, but what it is just part of it is broken right there that made it crooked. That one I think would have some good penetrating power.
Yeah, it does look like that.
I probably found that one at Bellevue. It either wasn't finished or it was broken, and there's a good example of how that bevel is missing there.
Yeah.
And so there's like a hunk of material that's missing there.
I see that.
I guess that would be more of a spear.
Pretty big, yeah.
Than an arrowhead.
Pretty serious. Maybe take a bear with that instead of just little deer, maybe.
Now my cousin Jimmy found this arrowhead. He found it in the same place where these two were found. And when he found it, it was absolutely perfect. It had like a needle point on the end of it. You could prick blood with it. And he took it around showing it to everybody. And I don't blame him, because it's so perfect. And I love all those scallops. And I love the little dots.
Yeah, I'll have
Almost looks like confetti or something falling in a night sky or something. But he had it. He didn't put it in a case or anything. He had it sitting on his mantle, and I don't know if somebody bumped into the wall or what. He said it fell off of the mantle, and it came down point first on the hearth and broke. I mean, even with that broke off, it's more intact than pretty much all my arrowheads here. But he brought it to me and asked me to take it, and I said, well, I don't want to take it. I didn't find it. And he said, I'm so sick.
It made him sick.
Over that. It just makes me sick to my stomach. If you don't take it, I'm just going to throw it away. And I was like, well, I'll take it. So that's where that one came from. Now, I never even touched on this one right here. I believe Pat also found that arrowhead. I'm not sure where he found it. Maybe in his garden or another little patch that he was plowing up. That one, if you had it picked up, is pretty sharp along the sides.
Nice.
And it's very flat. I think it would really kind of zip in.
Yeah, so that's definitely more kind of like the Magnus single bevel broadheads that I was talking about. This one thing, now you'll be able to see our filming light here. This is pretty much, you can see at the very edges, this is like translucent. So this reminds me more of like obsidian. And it's got that super shine, and of course this like extreme conchoidal fracture. And that's what lends itself to something that's able to be napped, I should say. Nappability, that's not a word. But that is what makes these arrowheads what they are. It's why you would use this material and not something else. Because of that conchoidal fracture, you're able to get these edges to make what you want, which is serrated, sharp, whatever you're looking for to actually slice through something.
That particular one, especially when he first found it, I mean, to me, it's a work of art.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Somebody was very, very, they were an expert, whoever made that one. I have two big spearhead things over here that I'll grab real quick. I have a few like this that would have been great big spearheads. You know, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I'm going to imagine at least that big, if not bigger. And of course, the bigger something is, the more odds it's going to get broken. That one, I believe, also came from Bellevue, and it's got some of that same rose kind of color as one of those that we looked at. But I would love to find a full spearhead. I would almost trade all my arrowheads for one full spearhead.
Yeah.
I've never found anything big like that. One of my teachers at Martins Creek found a lot of things like that were complete, and axe heads and peace pipes. His collection is so perfect. Now, he had a big advantage, which was he was hunting them back before the Smithsonian came to Cherokee County and removed a lot of things.
They sure did.
So there's a site in Peachtree, 15 minutes from here, in the 20s, where the Smithsonian literally just took entire truckloads
of dirt,
of earth and artifacts out of here. But this particular teacher that I'm talking about, he was able to hunt that area a lot
before.
And yeah, so he has a beautiful, beautiful collection. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have about as good an individual collection as is in existence.
Wow.
And he even worked a lot of them into like his fireplace. It's almost like his house is decorated.
Cool.
With them. But anyway, yeah, talking about them makes me want to hunt them again, but we don't have any place to hunt. Maria now owns the place that used to be Uncle Ray's garden. You know?
Right, it
if
does.
I owned it, I would plow it up.
Yeah. Can we pay you just for one season,
Yeah.
Maria? It'll
I'd
take a
say
while
if
for the
anybody
grass
wants
to come
plant
back.
something here, go for it. I'm
Yeah.
only plowing it for the arrowheads, so I'm in charge of the arrowheads. If you want to plant
Arrowhead
garden
collection.
here. Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean? This is something that's probably, if you don't live in an area where there is arrowheads, or this is just not something that you had exposure to, then this is probably new to you, and it's not something that you've seen before, and you're probably like, what do you mean? And you're just walking around finding these. And sometimes that is where you find them. You just happen to be looking down at the right place at the right time. You could be at a festival, because a popular location to have festivals is outdoors, in fields. Large plowed places. And I know lots of people have found arrowheads like that just at your festival. Look down, oh, there it is. You know,
Yeah.
it's something you have to
To
worry
me,
about.
the coolest thing about an arrowhead is just knowing that someone hundreds of years ago made that, held it in their hand, used it, you know, to feed themselves or protect themselves.
Yep.
And when I was teaching, I learned how to start fires with sticks and things like that. And this guy that showed me, he was part Native American. I'm trying to remember his name was something like Big Shoe or something.
Yeah.
His name had Shoe or Foot or something.
Cool.
Anyway, super nice man. And one point that he made when he didn't just teach me, he was also teaching my students about it. And he said, you know, you don't have to be necessarily Native American for like starting a fire with sticks to be part of your heritage, or arrowheads, because even if you were over in Europe and not here in North America, if you go back far enough in time, ancient white people also would have used stone arrows.
Sure.
They would have made fire with sticks and flint, and all those same survival things that we associate with Native Americans were also just general survival things for all people in really all parts of the world when you go back, 1,000 years or something, because there were no blacksmiths at one point.
Yeah.
There were no firearms.
It was
So everybody was. This was important to everybody.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's fascinating to think that they were able to take something out of their raw material, out of their environment, and fashion it for a purpose, for everyday use. I think that's just fascinating. And then how many items that they did the same thing with that don't keep, like rock does. How many things made out of leather? How many things made out of wood?
Their bowstring, I guess, would have been probably the hamstring from a white-tailed deer,
Something like that.
which would be very powerful. But you'd have to know how to dry it out and how to
work it.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Now I'll shoot one at the camera.
Blow it up. Well, thank you for coming along for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that this can be a resource that I can point people to in the future. If we ever get any questions about arrowheads, this would be something that you could watch and maybe learn a little bit more. Thank you for your time, for coming out here, and when I say out here, just mean up here at Living Too Far.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Sharing your collection with us. But as always, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for viewing. God bless you. God keep you. And we'll catch you at the next one. It's a wrap. Cool. This one, that might be one of my favorites. That just looks.
Don't you think though? It just doesn't look